So today we're going to be setting up our 55-gallon tank that is going to be for our eggs that we're receiving next Thursday. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to fill it up, get our chiller starting so that we can cool the water down. We have our water conditioner right here that we're going to be putting in, since our water does have different metals and everything in it. So we're going to make sure that it's nice and good for the fish. After we start to get it filled up and leveled out, then we will do some of our water testing with our API test kit, making sure that the water is doing good, doing its thing. We'll monitor the temperature to make sure that the temperature gets dropped down to our number, which I believe is now is like that 55 to 60 range, a little bit higher, so that the bacteria can grow a little bit better. We're also going to be using the quick starting method of cycling our tank. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take the filter, one of the filters from our big tank here that's had our big fish in it for a while, that has all that good bacteria in it. We're going to switch that over to here, and that's going to help to add all that bacteria and that good water right into this tank. We're also going to be taking a little bit of the water from this tank that's already cycled and putting into here as well, so that we'll be ready to go for next week. We're going to take our hose here and we're going to start filling up just with our tap water that we have here. So that's going to go. And then we're going to add our water conditioner in. Now we're using a different kind than the API water conditioner. We're trying this out because this actually, besides removing the chlorine and kind of adding that stress coat in, that helps the fishes with their mucous membranes. This also helps to detoxify ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate. And so we started this experiment with our big tank that we were having some issues with the nitrate on, and it actually did bring the levels down for us. So we're testing this out and seeing if it is worth the little extra price that this costs instead of the API. So just as on the API, we're going to read the instructions, make sure that we know how much we're going to add. And this is 1 capful or 5 milliliters for each 50 gallons. So this is a 55-gallon tank, so we'll go ahead and add the teeniest bit over 5 milliliters. All right, so we got our little bit over 5. We're just gonna put that in, rinse out our thing, and we're good to go. All right, so we have our tank filled up right now. Currently, our temperature is right around 74 degrees. And so it's definitely a little warm for trout, but that's gonna be perfect for our bacteria to start to grow over the weekend and up until about Monday or Tuesday, when we're gonna then turn the chiller on to get it ready for the eggs then. Around it, you can see we have our drip pan right here. So that in case there is any sort of leakage or anything, it's going to go into here, and then there's a cutout in the back where it will drain into a bucket, and that will save us from just water going everywhere. The other thing that you can see on the tank is all the insulation foam. The foam helps to keep in the cold water that the chiller is making, so that the chiller doesn't have to work as hard. The water is already, it's staying cold, it's insulating it. Our chiller here is in the middle of the tank. It's going to be between the intake and the outtake tubes once we put the filter on. That way the whole water is sucking in some cold air and then pulling it out, and kind of making that cycle going around. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and do a water testing on our tank here, just to see what we're at. So I have this is great, it's a little plunger here. We're going to fill all of our tubes up to that 5 milliliter line. Great idea to have some extra test tubes on hand, because no matter what, you're going to drop one and it's going to break. So always have some extras. There we go. All right, so we are going to test pH, ammonia, nitrate, and nitrite. I like to start with pH because it's the easiest and it's an instant read test. So all of the tubes have how many drops you're supposed to add, and then inside of the instructions it says how many minutes you're supposed to wait, or all your different steps to make sure that your test is done correctly. So we have our pH, we're gonna add 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Put our cap on, give it a little shake. All right, so then if we compare this to our chart here, we can actually see that it's at that 7.6. So if you ever get something that's at 7.6, you're then going to want to test the high range pH to see just how high your water really is.
Can I see that one more time against the chart?
Yes.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
So, since we are at that high, we're going to take our high range pH, and this we're going to add 5 drops, just to make sure it's not too high. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Put our tube on. Give it a little shake. Perfect. And yep, so we're okay. So this is at about that 7.4 then. So we're all right. So our 7.6 is the correct number there. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't too high. So then we're going to put your caps on so you don't forget that. And we're going to do ammonia next. So we have 2 bottles for ammonia. It has nice bottle 1, bottle 2. It's 8 drops for this guy. So we're going to take our first bottle, add our 8 drops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Important next step, we're going to invert it a couple times, shake it up. Then we have our bottle number 2. 8 drops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Put our cap on, invert it, and this is going to sit now for 5 minutes, okay? Our next test we're going to put in is our nitrite. This is just 1 bottle again. It's 5 drops, and then this also has to sit for 5 minutes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Invert. Sit for 5 minutes. And then we're gonna do our last one, which is our nitrate. Fill up my test tube here. Okay. This is again 2 bottles. So for our bottle 1, this is 10 drops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. Invert that a second. Now for the second bottle, before we add that, you're supposed to shake it for 30 seconds. You can do a dance, kind of do whatever you want to do. Why shake this for 30 seconds? This is the most labor intensive test, just because it's the 2, you gotta shake it, and then once we add this, we then invert the vial for about 60 seconds then, and then you let it sit for 5 minutes. So this is the one that takes the longest. This is the one also that you're gonna run out of the test kit faster than the rest of them. The great thing is that if you buy the big master test kit and you run out of one of these, the API does sell each test individually as well, so you can then just replace it. All right, so this is again 10 drops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That on. And now we're gonna invert this for about a minute and then let it sit for 5. And we'll be back to see what colors we got. All right, so now it's been our 5 minutes, so we're going to check our chemistry levels. Always good to be in a well-lit area so you can really see the colors. Our first 2 colors, of course, are from our pH and our high range pH, and those were our instant tests, so they're already done and we're good on those. Next over is our ammonia, which is at our nice 0 parts per million right there. Then next over is our nitrite, which is also at 0. Perfect. And then we have our nitrate, also at 0. So again, this is pretty typical because it's just our tap water that's coming out, and so usually all your levels are even across the board. Once you get your eggs, it should stay about at the zeros too until they start hatching. So once you have then baby fish in your tank, they're going to start producing waste, and so then your ammonia is going to go up, and then your tank's going to start to cycle through each of the 3 different chemicals there. But we're going to keep an eye on that ammonia, and if we have high ammonia, you have to do some water changes. Another good thing is we have a bare bottom tank on our fish tank so that we can actually see when the waste builds up, and we know exactly where to siphon all of that waste out so that our ammonia doesn't get too high and kill our fish. So the other test that we're going to do is our KH, which checks the hardness of our water. So we have our little Hannah instrument here. It is a little pricier than the API, the little drops that you do, and basically that's a titration. So you keep adding the drops until you get a color change. This is a little more accurate, a little more expensive, but it's super easy. So we have our checker here. I'm just going to turn it on, and then I have filled up
Bring it up here.
our little test tube up to the line, and this is 10 milliliters, so we're gonna put our cap on. This, it's super important that if you're touching the bottle, that you just give it a little wipe off before you put it in the machine. So we're at C1, we're going to add our just water by itself. Click our button, gonna think for a little bit. All right, and now we're at C2, it says add, so we're gonna add our reagent. Open this up. And we're gonna add an entire milliliter or full cc, so a whole syringe here. Turn it out, open it up. I just hold it with the towel, then I don't have to worry about my fingerprints. Add that in. Put our cap on. Mix it up a little bit. Stick that back in. Close it up. And click our button again. 83. So ideally we want to be right around 100, if not more than 100. And so whenever your KH starts to get a little bit low, you can actually add some baking soda in, and that's going to make your KH go up, and also your pH will go up a little bit too. So we have our 2 filters back here that are on our big 145 gallon tank. We're going to be moving the fluval filter over to our 55 with our eggs. And so these guys are super easy to use, both this one and the Cascade filter that we've been using. Both of them have an easy way where you can stop the water without there being water everywhere when you're moving stuff or when you're cleaning the filter. So we're gonna go ahead and unplug our filter. And then we're gonna take and stop the water by lifting up this lever right here, like that. So now our water is stopped and we're good to go. Then we can take the other red lever here, lift that up. Sometimes you get a little water. Have a towel handy. And now we have our filter. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're going to be moving this over into a bin, just so we can prevent water from going everywhere. If you have a floor drain, that's also super helpful. So now we're gonna go ahead and open this up. So it has the little levers on the side. And we're gonna pull down and then pull this part up. Okay, so we have our first tray here. We're going to just take out the ChemiPure pack because this is what we're going to be replacing. And then we're gonna dump that biomedia into here. So we're not going to be rinsing that. That has our good bacteria. Taking out the other one. Then we're gonna rinse off our cage here too. So then we have our other one. Dumping that out. Next, these out. Taking out our packs. And then we have one more down in here. Dump off our biomedia. And then underneath here is just our little sponges that also help to filter out all that big fish waste. So we're gonna go back and rinse all of this stuff off. We're also going out our pre-filter here, and then we'll reassemble everything and get that moved over to our 55-gallon. All right, so here we are. We just have all of our filter stuff that we're going to be rinsing off. You can either do it in a sink. It just takes a little while depending on your sink pressure. So I'm lucky in the fact that I have a hose that I can use to help rinse everything off a little bit easier. That's nice. And this, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. It's just something that you got to do when you're taking care of animals.
Look at all that stuff in there.
And squeeze that out. All right. Back in. Second one. Oh yeah. That's the good stuff.
One thing I'll point out is that in the manual, we normally put different pads in the bottom, buffing pads, but since we don't have any on hand, we're going to use these that come with the Fluval for now.
So then our other casings, just going to give them a good rinse. And again, this is then where our new ChemiPure packs and our biomass are going to go back into then. Got one more in here. All right. So then the nice thing about this is we're just going to put these in the sink. And I'll wash them later, and then we'll have those as just a backup then, because we're going to replace those with new ones. Just going to give this a rinse. We'll put our new ones in then. So then, inside of our big hood here, you can actually do more than just clean the top of this. So I'm just going to give that a squirt first of all. Then to get in to where the propeller is, you'll see this red disc. You're going to find the button, pull up on that. That's going to come right out. I can then give that a good rinse. Then in here, it's always good to check your propeller. And this, if I can get it out. So this is held in with a magnet.
Oh.
And it's a little slippery. There it is. So this piece right here is what holds everything together, and it's ceramic, and it breaks really easily, and sometimes it just breaks because it can. If that happens, you want to have one of these on hand as a replacement part. You can easily order a replacement on Amazon and just have it with you just in case something were to happen. So I'm going to stick that back down in there. This is actually pretty clean. Nothing is around the impeller. Sometimes depending on what gets into your tank, you might have like strings of algae, or sometimes hair gets into the tank. So you're just going to want to make sure that this is nice and clean. And then that goes right back on there, and then we can see it spins around. So then we're going to take our lid to that, push that back down in. You'll hear a click when you know that you've got it in good. So it clicked in, and so now we're good.
One more thing.
Yeah.
This is a good check. This red thing should be below the white surface area, if you can kind of point that out.
Yeah, so this is what's creating the seal right in there. And so this, you can see, is lower than your white surface right here. It's nice and sealed in, and we heard the click.
Okay.
All right, so now we're gonna load everything back on up and go out and assemble the filter.
Okay.
All right, so our easiest thing here is our pre-filter. So we're just gonna take our new filter pads, and those just get stuck right in. Gotta wiggle them a little bit. It is a tight fit. There's one. And this one. Perfect. All right, so now we have our biomass here, which again is what we're worried about with bacteria, because these contain more surface area than our filter pads do. It's that nice cylinder with the hole in the middle there. And so all of our bacteria is nice and safe in here. We're also saving the water that was inside of the filter as well. So with these then, we're gonna go ahead and load up couple of our trays here. So we have our bottom one, which has the big filter foam in it. So we're gonna go ahead and put
and normally in the manual it tells you to remove the initial black pads that come with the fluval and put in the buffing pads. We don't have any on hand now, so we're just going to go ahead and use those.
Yep. So make sure that they're as flat as possible, because your trays then are going to interlock down into each other. And so you can test it before you stick it in there. And you can see how nice and flush that is with everything. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop this down in. All right. And then my next one here, I'm gonna go ahead and fill it on up. Drop that right down on top of the other one, making sure that I can you can feel and kind of make sure that it's nice and clicked in there. All right. Then our next one, we're gonna go ahead and add our ChemiPure pads that we rinsed and then had soaking. And so stick those two right in here. This one. And if you have a little extra biomass left over, you can go ahead and put a little bit on top of them too. All right. And then we're gonna sink that in. And then right now I had 4 of the ChemiPure pads in my other filter. I only had 2 right now. So this one we're just gonna leave empty for now until I get my other 2 pads. So that goes in on top like that. Then you have your lid for that. This again, you should make sure that it goes down in and it clicks and everything's nice and flat and flush all the way down. Then we have our that we stick right on in, down like that. Okay, to give this a little bit extra of a kickstart, we have our Night Out 2 bacteria right here. And because it's a new tank setup, we're gonna do 150 milliliters. So, pour some, it's great to pour it right into the filter, because that's where that bacteria is and where it's gonna find its home. Pour some into this side. And there we go. All right. So then we can put this on. And then what we're gonna do is, because we've saved the water, we're gonna go ahead and pour our water into our filter. This also helps with just getting the pump to prime so that it actually sucks in water. It's easier when it's already got water in it. There we go. Probably gonna add a little bit more with our hose. All right. And now make sure it's gonna float a little bit, and that's because of the biomaterial, but as long as it still feels like it's all connected and nestled down in, we're good. So another important thing that does require some maintenance is your O-ring, which this is what creates a seal on the hood of the filter so that when the water is running through it, it doesn't leak out and then you have leaks coming down the side. So if you notice that, it might be time to go ahead and grease this. So we're gonna take just a little bit.
That's a pure silicone grease made for aquarium products. You can find it on Amazon.
And we're just gonna go ahead, rub this around. Making sure that we cover the whole thing. A little bit more. Alright, so that's nice and greased now. And then we just fit it right back in over. Make sure that it's all sealed all the way around. And you can see there's a little groove that it fits right into. It goes all the way around. And so now we're going to go ahead and put the hood back on top. This part goes right down into the red part there, like that.
And one thing you can also notice, if you greased your O-ring, you can press down now on the top evenly, and most of the time it'll go in place.
Yep.
It's not quite there yet.
Almost.
There we go.
This should click it right down in, and you can see that seal just goes out of the way.
Yeah.
Right like
So
that.
there should be no gap in there, and if there is a gap, it's probably going to leak, and if you can't get rid of the gap, it's because the O-ring needs to be greased.
Yep. So we're good to go. That's all nice and down.
Okay.
All right, so this is our intake and our outtake tube. It does have some water in it. Remember, we sealed it off down at the bottom there. So what we're gonna do is this is our intake, and then this is our outtake. So an important thing to do is make sure your filter, you either shift your filter first, or you put these on first, and then make sure that the ends of the hoses get plugged into the right intake and the right outtake. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this right in here. And this tank we used last year for our eggs, so our insulation here has a little gap cut out in the back of it so that fits right down into it, that you can see right there. And then the same thing is happening right over here with our outtake. I'm just gonna turn that so it sprays actually into the tank. There we go. All right. And now we have our bottom part here, making sure that all this is nice and tight so that we don't have any leaks. All right. And then we see where I need to move my filter over here. All right, so I gotta move this over a little bit so that the tubing will reach. This is a slightly different setup than what we had the last time. So then we're gonna go ahead, put that in. This red part then should click down in, and the whole thing sinks into that little groove. And then we'll be good to go to open this up. And you can actually hear, I heard the water flowing. And then we're gonna plug this in and see if we can get a cycle start. Just need a little bit of help. The other method that I use is I'm gonna go grab our hose and I force water up into the intake so that what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna take this part off so I have more room. Take my hose. All right, so you can actually see that we're getting all the air pockets out of there. And we're good. Wonderful. And now I can put my ends back on.
And also what's important is you have to watch where this stream of water is coming from the output so that it doesn't come out of the tank. One other thing that I can point out is that having this ripple across the surface of the water simulates the riffles and waterfalls in the stream, and this is what's putting the oxygen in the water. Okay, one method of doing it. This is a natural method.
And then of course you also have your bubbler too. Okay. All right, so we have our air stone now that's also putting the oxygen into our water. It moves back around here where it does have a valve, check valve here. This is to make sure that in case any water gets sucked up, it doesn't go into then the pump portion and fry your pump. So you want to make sure that you do have one of those. This is going to come down like this and then goes to our pump, and then it's all hooked up right in there. Comes down and then goes to be plugged in. All right, so because our pH was a little bit low, we want it to be, when it's first starting out, around that 150, and then after a while you can let it drop down to 100-ish, but as long as it's above that 100, that's what we're aiming for. So we're gonna go ahead and add 2 tablespoons of baking soda to our tank here. I know I'm kind of cheating because this is actually a liquid measure, but close enough. All right, so there's our one. Just gonna shake that on in there. And now that our pump is running, that'll help to mix it in there. Our 1 tablespoon and our 2nd tablespoon.
And the one good thing about getting it started at the correct level before you put the eggs in is you're not making a big drastic change with live critters in there.
Correct.
And so now's the time to do it when you're setting your tank up.
Because this is also going to then also make your pH go up a little bit. So it's best to shock the tank now when there's nothing living in it. All right, so our tank has now been circulating for a little bit, letting that baking soda kind of get mixed in. So we're going to retest the KH again. So again, I have my water in here filled up. Put the screw on, wipe it down. Doesn't have any fingerprints on it.
Show me the top level where the water is with the line here.
So again, so you can see that meniscus. You want to make sure the meniscus, the bottom of it, is matched up with that line as best as you can. All right, so my reader is on, C1, put that in, close it up, push our button. Now it says C2, so we're gonna go ahead and open it up. We're gonna put in our reagent. So again, with this, same thing, our plunger should go all the way and match right with that bottom line there. So that's 1 milliliter or 1 cc right there. And then we're gonna go ahead and put that in, put our lid on. The cool thing is I can already tell there's a difference just based on what color this turns. So this is more of a blue color. So our number should be different. Put that in, press our button. Yeah, 162, look at that.
Man.
Perfect. All right, so we've done our regular water testing again now too, since we added some stuff and we had our filter cycling now for a little bit. The biggest difference here is because we added that baking soda, and it made our KH go up. It also made our pH go up. So once again, I tested with the regular pH, and we are definitely at a 7.6. So since we're there, we then have to test the next for the high range. And then looking at the high range, last time we had that 7.4. Now we have that more 8.0, almost towards that 8.2. So our pH definitely did go up with that baking soda. Then when we look at our ammonia, if you look carefully, it actually did go up a little bit. It might not be quite at 0.25, but that's because of that the waste and everything that was already in that filter water from our old tank. So that went up a little teeny bit. That'll probably level off though, since there's going to be nothing living in this tank until next week. And then if we look at our other two, we're good to go because our nitrite is at 0 and our nitrate is getting a little darker. You can see almost at 5.0 again, because our tank over yonder has a high nitrate level. Even though we added only a little bit in, it did make it go up just a teeny little bit. But overall, good numbers. So the last thing that we're going to add on to our tank today is we're going to put this little, it's a floral wrap, what florists use. You can get these from your Trout in the Classroom volunteer. And we're going to put this over the intake tube. Now, we won't have to worry about it right away when the eggs and the albuins are in the egg basket. But once you release them, that's a pretty strong suction down there, and we don't want them getting slurped up into the filter. So I'm just going to slide this over it and then use a rubber band to tie it on. There we go. All right. And that. Slide that down a little bit. All right. Now our babies, when we release them, will be safe.
Okay, we're going to bring a little bit of modern technology to Trout in the Classroom here. What we have is a system called PolyPonics that was developed several years ago by an engineer and teachers down at Polytechnic in Baltimore City. And it was done under a grant by, we don't have it.
Sea grant.
Sea grant. So anyway, we'll have stickers on here later once we get them. So here's what's going to happen. There are several components to this, okay? First of all, the bottom board, we bring in the probes that we want to measure, okay, and they connect in there. These signals that are down here are in an analog version. Then what happens is the signals go through these yellow wires into this Arduino board, and they get converted into digital, and then they go up into this Raspberry Pi 4. And what happens in there is they actually get sent out on its own network, and it gets transmitted over to the server. This unit here is called the client, okay? Now, over here, we have 3 probes right now that we're borrowing. Okay, this is a temperature probe, this is a pH probe, and this is dissolved oxygen. Okay, and what we're doing is it takes samples periodically, and then it computes them using a mathematical formula over on the server, and we get a digital display on the server monitor. Now, I'm going to point out that right now we know we have a problem with our pH sensor. It went out of calibration a couple days ago. And also I want to point out that we've only got 3 probes, the pH and dissolved oxygen, which is
there.
Yeah, right here, and we're in the green here at about over 6.3, probably 7, I guess.
Yeah, it says 8.4.
Oh yeah, right. 8.4.
8.4?
And that's milligrams per liter. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what that says.
Yeah. Okay, it's kind of interesting. And then our temperature, I don't think is exactly right. It's showing at about a little less than 80 right at the moment. And our water temperature, we think actually, we'll have to take another test, but the digital meter we have in there says it's 73. So we're actually looking at a room, a water temperature that should be around room temperature, and it's just this is showing a little higher. More on this at a later date.
Yes.
And we're getting probes. We've ordered 7 probes, and they should be in about 2 weeks. Okay, this is the server portion of the PolyPonics, and what happens is it receives the Wi-Fi signal from the client unit, and again, this is not on the Irvine network, a wireless network. It's on its own network, and so it's separate from the in-house network. And it receives the information, and it does all the mathematical formulas in here on programming that was put on to a micro SD card right here. And then it stores the data on this scan disk flash drive, okay? And then we have the ability to export data periodically.
All right, so right here we actually have the web server piece of the PolyPonics system. So there is a little thingy back here, extra server, that's able to pick up the information, and it's transmitted all the way from back yonder in the exhibit hall up to our big TV so that we can look at it here or back on our monitor that we have.